Well, at ease, paratroopers. If you like that reference from HBO's hit series Band of Brothers, you're going to like this podcast. My name is Kevin Kidder, and after 20 years in the Army, I discovered something unexpected. The toughest battles weren't behind me, they were just different. This is the Enduring Mindset Podcast. In our inaugural season, The Invisible Veteran, we'll explore what it really takes to reclaim purpose, rebuild identity, and restore connection after service. This podcast isn't just for veterans, it's for anyone navigating transition leaders, spouses, teammates, anyone asking, who am I now and what comes next? Each week, I'll share lessons from my journey, stories from others who walk similar paths, and tools to help you build what I call an enduring mindset, one forged through adversity, guided by purpose, and grounded in service to others. Before we dive in, I just want to thank you for being here. I know there are literally thousands of other things you could be listening to, and the fact you chose this podcast means a lot. My hope is that you walk away each week with something useful, a story, a reminder, or even a little encouragement. This is a really exciting moment for me because it's the first time I have a guest on, and you don't have to listen to me ramble on all by myself. This week's guest is Army Sergeant First Class retired Lucas Kudrna, whom I've had the pleasure of knowing for 23 years. K, as he is known, is my son's godfather, my best friend, and just an incredible man, father, husband, champion for veterans, and human being. I'm thoroughly excited to share his message with you and for you to hear his insight, experiences, and humor. Dude, welcome to the podcast. It is so good to have you on.
Thank you very much. And I'm very pleased and honored that you would invite me.
So I was struggling with how I wanted to introduce you because you are larger than life at times. And I came up with two different ways to introduce you to our audience. The first is designed to illustrate the significance you have in my life. It's based off a meme or reel, whatever you want to call it. And I sent it to you the other day. And it's, I best friended so hard. Everybody in my life knows your name without ever having met you. Right. And then the second is providing a mental image for the listener because they're going to hear your voice and they'll be like, whoa, I wonder what this guy looks like. And for that, I'm going to say if Jason Momoa was actually good looking and he looked like a Viking.
Man, you're setting the standards way too high.
No. And so much so, as a matter of fact, like you came up to visit me right after I bought my house in Michigan. We went downtown Plymouth and we hit up, highly recommended spot. We grab a table. I go to the bar to grab the first round, and it takes longer than it should because I'm 5'8" on a good day. I have a voice for the braille and a face for radio. And you get up, you go by the next round, and your command presence is just obvious. Like the bartender's looking up at you. And you're back in under 60 seconds. Nicolas Cage texted me. He's like, wow, that was fast. And this is where I'm just like, okay, this is what being invisible feels like. Because we're like, okay, let's go check out the rest of the dig, see what this place is all about. You lead the way, and like Moses in the Red Sea, the patrons in the establishment just part. Men are looking away, they're ashamed, probably flaccid, completely defeated by the presence of a real man. Simultaneously, women's knees are trembling, their lips quiver, their eyes lock onto you, just hungry, starving, and lust fills the air. It's just uncanny. And then here I am behind you, trying not to get swallowed by the Red Sea as it closes. I'm like, where are we going, Thunder? Oh, so to you, listener, this is a man. This is a man's man, and he's incredible. So again, thank you for being here, and hopefully that lets them know how close we are. And yeah.
If only my wife felt that way.
Oh, she does. So I sent you a text earlier about how I kind of wanted to open the show, and I want to let the listener know. So I was at a conference in LA in April, and one of the breakout sessions was hosted by Brett Ledbetter. He's a mental performance coach, big basketball guy, and his breakout session was the power of asking better questions. Talked about himself a little bit, and then being a basketball guy, he said the Oklahoma City Thunder will win the NBA Finals. So, Brett, if you ever listen to this, you were right. They did win. I love that you called that back in April. Then at the end of the conversation, he plugs his new book, 365 Questions, Getting to Know Yourself and Your Team Better. And I had a conversation with him after, and I took his advice and I've made it my own, which is anytime I have a guest, I want to have them pick a number between 1 and 365 and read that question for the first time during the podcast. So we get a real unscripted, authentic response. So here we go. You ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When have you asked yourself, am I good enough? And name 3 situations where that came to mind.
Wow.
And yeah,
Okay.
this isn't softball, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah. This is man, it's a bad time to quit drinking. Well, when is the last time I asked myself if I was good enough?
Yeah, three times that you
3 times. Well, one for sure would be the endeavor that we took on. So I worked for, when I left the military, I worked for 2 different corporate entities. The second one I worked for was a dream job. And so you imagine how big of an opportunity had come to me for me to walk away from a dream job. And I was also kind of fronted with the idea that I got tired of working for people. So I left my job and I went farming full time. I had been farming on the side on top of working a regular job. And the opportunity presented was I had contacts with cafe owners and grocery stores, Middle Eastern, and my part in the whole thing was raise goats. And so we had over 60 bred does. Those are female mom goats or about to be moms. Come in from Colorado, and we did that. I am not new to farming, but I'm new to goats. And I will tell you, we lost our ass. The amount of attrition rate was way higher than the normal average. And it got to the point where the more we learned, the more we didn't like the breed. How is it so goddamn hard to keep a goat alive? And the wet season, everything else, the whole other thing ends up being that we end up selling all the goats. We're like, we are going to start over in the spring and rebuild the infrastructure. And that exact question that you questioned me on is a statement that I made to my wife. And it was, I don't think I'm good at this. I'm not sure. I don't think I've ever failed so miserably at anything in my life. And her response to that was, when we started doing birds, we failed. You sucked at it. When you started doing hogs, you failed. You sucked at it. And she's like, now you run an operation that is awesome. Like the designs, everything else, those things worked out, minimal labor, max output. I mean, it is perfect. And she's like, you just need to figure this out. So the last time I thought that I was a failure at something or not good enough for something, absolutely was that endeavor. Um, Uh, man, being a father, right? There has been multiple times where I asked myself, am I good enough for my kids? Right. And I had to learn a lot from, the failures that look, there's a million books out there. There's a million books out there on how to be a parent. Right. But the problem is that every kid you have is custom built. There's no one thing that fits all, right? I have 4 kids and I have 4 different personalities, right? And you can go look at a book all you want. You're not going to find those personalities because, again, they're custom built. So definitely on being a father. And then I think the one before that, I don't think I have one that sticks out, but I think if I were to pick one and say just randomly grasp at straws here in my career, there was multiple times where I faced situations and looked back on them and said, hey, am I good enough to do this, or why is this not working? And when things don't work, the first thing you do is say, instead of laying blame or trying to lay blame on somebody else's hands, right? You and I are very much alike. The first thing I ask myself is, why does this suck? Right? What did I do wrong? And so I think there's parts in any leader's career that they can look at and say, hey, if you take the initiative, right, and the responsibility of the situation, I think there's going to be times in everyone's lives when they ask themselves, am I good enough and how could I improve this? And so that's my answer to your question, a very long-winded answer.
I love those. And you hit on some things that I definitely I'm going to say it and just don't shoot me for it. We're going to circle back. I want to ask one follow-up question to that. And that's, what would be the internal or external influences that have caused you to ask yourself, am I good enough?
Okay. Well, I know my ex-wife is not going to listen to this, so I can talk freely. No, but for real, I think that so a goldfish, they say, will only grow to a certain size based on the environment of which it's in, the size of the tank, right? I think that us as individuals, our rates of success is based on the environment we are placed in.
100%.
And when I say the size of the tank, I also mean the size of your footprint, those that support you, right? Well, my ex-wife and I split. We split because we both sucked at being married to each other. It was a conflict of interest across the board. We just had two different character conflicts, basically. But I would tell you that the person I was when I was married to her and the person I am now married to my wife currently, I will tell you that a huge position in that, or a huge part of that, has everything to do with the person standing behind you.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. There's so many ways to say it. Show me your friends, I'll show you your future. The most important decision someone can make is who they choose to spend the rest of their life with.
Absolutely.
Right. And you and I have very similar experiences. I'm now married to an incredible woman who supports me and loves me unconditionally. And through all of my many flaws, she's seen me at my worst where I had nothing to provide and just encourages me through love and grace and humility to become who I'm supposed to be.
I love
So,
that.
yeah, she's incredible. She listens, babe. I love you. You're great.
She's all right.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move into military service. And you mentioned some things that you think are commonplace, but if you zoom out a little bit and look at the not good leaders you've had, whether they were in the military or if they were management within your civilian employments, I think you're going to see a common theme, which is number one, people don't internalize fault first. They tend to blame, they flick the booger. Right. So to hear you say the first thing I do is what did I do wrong? That's leadership in a nutshell, right? You praise in public, you reprimand in private, you take the hit when things go wrong, and you give credit to everybody else when things go right.
Yeah, that's one thing I always told my people when I was in leadership positions is that, and even after when I went into the corporate world and I had some positions of authority, and I always told the people that I was responsible for that, look, guys, your success is your hard work. Your failure is my fault, right? And the reason I say that is because if they have all the tools and all the directions and all the teachings, then they should be successful. If they're not successful, because I didn't give them the tools, the teachings, and the practices they needed. The end.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a mentality that is lost outside of a service profession, whether it's the military, if you're a firefighter, if you're law enforcement, if you're a nurse, if helping others is the root of what you do, you have to take ownership, right?
Absolutely.
And taking ownership is a key characteristic of leadership. And you've seen some really good and really bad leaders in the military. You can specify, but who left the biggest impression on you as leaders? A couple top three, top five.
It's funny is that one of the things that I have developed since leaving the military through my experiences of what I've done, memory loss is a huge one of those. So I
Right.
have a lot of faces, but I don't have shit for names. But there's always been a couple individuals. There was a master sergeant, you knew him very well. He, man, I don't like talking about him. So since he passed, man, that just hits. Anyways, he did a couple things for me that I'm not going to go into detail about. But what I will say is that there were circumstances that I was in that could have gone completely left, right? And his simple actions that he took, it was that kind of leadership that I was like, dude, I want to be like him. Right. And then there was a period of time during our deployment in Afghanistan when, like my dad always said, the thing I hated most about you being in combat is that you're always fighting two wars. And he was talking about combat in country and then combat in a relationship. And that man took time out of his day, even though we didn't have all, we had obviously the op tempo was going and things like that. But that dude at 3 o'clock in the morning would sit with me and talk and just let me talk, and then he would throw little croutons of advice and things like that in there. We weren't, I wasn't me, a staff sergeant at the time and him a master sergeant at the time, me standing at parade rest, listen to this guy. We were literally just me talking to a mentor, right? and just two dudes just talking kind of thing. And for him to transition out of a position of extreme authority to that kind of person, I mean, man, you just don't find stuff like that. You don't find people like that, especially in the military. It's like, it's like when we were at Fort Lewis, right? And we had that LT, and we went to that club, and he was sitting there talking to a chick. He's like, "Yeah, these are all my guys." Like, not one of us is your guy. You know what I'm saying? Number one, you're trying to use your LT authority to pick up chicks. Please let her be young enough to not know you're dumb, right? And the second thing is looking at us like we are, coins in your purse, right? And so things like that have always kind of pushed me away from that concept of, looking at your people and being like, my authority is where I derive all of my strength. Massart did not. The dude was 5'4", okay?
Right.
He made you look tall, right?
I know.
And that dude, you know how you gave your felonious advertisement of how I walk into a room. That man had a commanding presence. That I walked into a room like he was 7'7", okay? And everyone looked at him like he was 7'7". So, of all the people that of leadership at that level, that was probably one of the only ones who ever truly stuck out. Now, I will tell you, and I'm not trying to stroke your ego, okay?
Don't do it.
Calm down, right? But I think that one of the things influence-wise is that you and I grew off of each other. Right. Each of us have our own strengths and each of us have our own weaknesses. And what I think is awesome about our career together. Right. So for people who don't know, we literally joined at the same time. I joined a year earlier, but we met as privates and then literally retired on the same damn day.
Yeah.
Through that period of time, we were stationed together multiple times. We deployed together, all that good stuff. And it's just 2 times, one Iraq in 2004 and then Afghanistan in 2010. And it's like you look back on that and you're like, dude, like I wanted to punch that dude in the face so many times. Okay. But and I know that that's very much it goes both ways on that, but the growth meter on that, right? So people having an impact in your life, dude, we walked side by side for how long? How could that not have an impact?
Right. And
that's all I'll say about that.
Well, let's tease this out a little bit. How do you think us serving together has shaped the bond we've carried into civilian life? I almost threw up. I was like, I've been out of the Army it's 4.5 years. I've almost been retired for 5 years.
Yeah.
I keep thinking it was yesterday, and I'm like, oh man, that was 20% of my enlistment. Where did the time go?
That was a whole duty station. I've been at duty stations less than that time. Okay, so how has us growing together shaped, the bond? I mean, and I'm not saying this is us, but let's look at this for instance, right? So a lot of times people who go to rehab, right? Okay, they go to rehab and they end up befriending somebody. Now, it's not uncommon for those people to become extremely close because you build bonds under fire. That's all there is to it, right? But fire doesn't have to always be gunfire. It can be life, right? And battles and challenges. So I think the growing period, I mean, dude, we could write a book on our stories alone. Right? But there had to be a lot of name changes and shit like no, babe, these are all just jokes. But look at where we started at, right? We started at being, and mind my French here, but a couple of cocksuckers who really thought they were invincible, right?
Yeah.
And everything from our airborne handshake to everything, going on from there, man. I mean, running across intersections, leaving our vehicles, jumping through yards, trying to meet up at random spots. Just shit like that. And we could go on and on and on about that stuff, but Iraq, right? Iraq was, dude, what was crazy about Iraq? Right? We're not going to talk about deployments the whole time, but what was crazy about Iraq was that when you and I went to Iraq, dude, the only combat we had ever seen was on TV. Right. And the briefings we had when, some dude went from one of the groups would come in and be like, listen, guys, they got RPGs and PKMs and everything. And we're like, what the fuck are any of those? Right. And they're like, yeah, and they're going to kill you. right? And you're like, okay, cool. Thanks for the most confidence there, guys. And then you look at our SOPs and everything, how we train Vietnam tactics, right? It wasn't urban tactics. And the same thing about, there's an object in the road, how do we deter and go, how do we navigate that, right? And that ended up being like really, really outdated. But it's funny because some of the attacks that happened on our company were exactly textbook, right?
Yeah.
But let's look at that. So, again, I don't want to get too deep into it because I don't want to sit here and cry the whole time with you. But Berger, right?
Right.
Now the attack on Carballo, that was nuts. Okay. A lot of stuff happened, and a lot of lies were detracted from the population, and including Berger and everything else across that board. I mean, I would tell you, man, that on day 6 of going straight back out, I'm gonna tell you a story. I may not have told you this before, and this is after Jesse had passed. Dude, I didn't think I was gonna make it. Right? I'm like, we're out there, and we're not kicking in doors of that place, but where we were at, we were basically just sitting and absorbing all kinds of nonsense, right? And there was one day where we're getting ready to roll back out, and I was absolutely convinced, like, dude, I'm gonna get smoked out here. Like, there's no way my luck is this good, right? And I was just sitting in the Humvee, getting ready in the chalk, and I was there by myself for a second, and I was like, man, I'm not much of a praying type. I grew up Catholic and everything, but I'd seen too many things, and I was like, I don't know. Maybe his phone's busy, but we're gonna make a call. So I was there in the Humvee, and I was like, God, if you can hear this, I'm not saying I'm deserving of any of this, but if there's a chance that I can make it out of this, I'd really love you to throw me a bone. And that's all I said. And then there was a hand on my shoulder. And I looked over, and there was a chaplain standing there, and he's like, mind if I pray with you? I was like, okay.
Message received.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, the wind blew. No, this dude showed up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But you went off and you were in the JOF and things like that. We got split up there for a little while, and we both had our own experiences, and those experiences honestly shaped us in a way that good, bad, or indifferent, here we are today. You move on for life experiences through law enforcement. The thing about law enforcement is that everyone wants to hit on cops, whether you're military cops or civilian cops, all that good stuff. We're glorified, security guards.
Yeah.
Glorified security guards don't show up to murders, rapes, assaults, all that stuff like that right there. That's what law enforcement does. And so when we leave combat, we don't get the break. We come back to a different type of combat, and it's the combat of combating really our own personal feelings, trying to control things, trying to move forward and stuff. We sat on, that murder case that we sat on where you dumped a goddamn thing of water on me because I'd fallen asleep. But the thing is that we experience those things together, right? And may not have been all the time right next to each other, but we experienced enough of it that we grew. And the one thing I liked about it, looking back on it, is that, and I have no shame in saying this, I have no shame at all. It was you and Jason that pulled me out of the rabbit hole. Okay.
And you the same,
Boston.
more than once.
And like I said, I have no shame in saying this. After Iraq, I was fucked up. A lot of things that, and even now today, I would still like to maybe blur out some shit. But yeah, I played Russian roulette and stuck a revolver in my mouth, right? And I did that because I was like, look, I just need either it to be done or a sign that it's not done, right? I know this is some deep shit right off the bat. But I spun the barrel 5 times, and there's only 5 rounds. And it went click every time. It was the next day that I had told Boston and you, and it was immediately after that I got wrapped up. So how do you equate that to everything? Dude, we've been at our highs together and our lows together. When I say lows, I'm talking Mariana Trench lows, right? And we've been through marriage together. We've been through childbirth together. We've been through divorce together. So how do you think that shaped who we are today in our bond? Throw a rock in either direction and grab a subject and we'll talk.
Yeah.
That's it, man. I mean, it's just we have been under fire of life in all different kind of genres, and we had two options: you grow together or you grow apart.
Exactly.
And we grew together, and I'll tell you, man, there's four of us, and we're called the Horsemen for a reason because we're not keeping up the world; we're keeping up our worlds. So that's my
Yeah.
answer. Again, long-winded.
No, not long-winded. Number one, thank you for sharing that story. That is the purpose behind the podcast and the book. It's gritty, man. Like getting out of the military is tough. The stuff you experience in the military is tough. It's September, it's Suicide Awareness Month. And if that message can impact one life, if it can save one life, then everything we do is totally worth it. I do want to go back to something you said when you were praying and you said, if I'm worthy, and this is where I'm going to put on my faith hat and just say it. There's a huge movement across the country right now. My mom's been talking about it for months, almost a year. She's a devout Catholic of the Christian faith. And here's what's awesome about Jesus and about God is Christianity is the only religion where you're not required to check boxes and prove your worth. Jesus Christ was crucified in the most horrific manner. It's the worst way you could be killed at the time. He gave his life. He lived a perfect life and absolved all of us of our sins. And we never have to prove our worth. Right. So you are always worthy in God's eyes.
That's cool.
Yeah. So let's talk about life after service. What was the transition from the uniform to corporate? Like you have a little bit different experience than some people.
Yeah, I will tell you right now that I'm chomping at the bit. I've been excited to talk about this. And the reason being is because I learned so much and a lot was exposed, right? So let me explain. Number one, so I have two other friends that got out at the same time I did, roughly. Okay. One was a major, one was a first sergeant, and then me, sergeant first class, right? And the reason I'm bringing these two gentlemen and myself up is because we got out at the same time, we all got out with different agendas, right? Top got out, he was like, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna wing it, right? And the major got out, he was like, I'm gonna go to GS, right? So, and I got out, and before I got out though, I joined an organization, USA Cares, and they have a transitional service that is phenomenal. I will briefly explain what their service is. So they have a small portion of what they do, right? A very, very small portion is transitional services. Basically, you apply. It's an 8-week program. And once you get into it, they have personnel who will go through. They have no military affiliation. And that is perfect because they take your resume and they make it make sense. They change everything from military lingo to civilian. So instead of me being a provost sergeant, right? Instead of me being a provost sergeant, I was a deputy director. Okay. And that translates, right? I mean, you ask a lot of people in the military, what's a provost sergeant? I'm like, I don't know. But on the civilian side, they'll have no clue. So that's one thing they do is they civilianize your resume. Once your resume has been cleaned up and civilianized, it then that basically turns you into a free agent, right? There are multiple corporate organizations that are waiting for this pot to get filled so they can reach in and pull out who they think they want to take a look at. Also involving your input. Hey, this company's looking for somebody. What do you think? And so your free agency will last about 8 weeks. Once this process starts, you will go work for them, right? Non-paid, it's a cohort, basically what you're doing, and you're with them. And if it's a good, solid fit, they like you, you like them, it's a pretty good chance you're going to get an offer. What's cool about the USA Cares program is that this is not hourly work, right? This is all salary jobs. So I ended up getting hired by a company, and I was making more money than I could have possibly ever hoped for. Top was still looking for a job, and the major was working for USO. So I'm into my job about a year and a half wise, making 80K plus. And I was like, okay, cool. Where are you guys at? And they're like, Top was working for HRC, right? At home, doing online chat stuff and then some other stuff, looking at backgrounds and things like that, HRC stuff. And the major was still looking for these other aspects. So he ended up getting back into government, right? And working that way. And Top still kind of just floating around. Now, funny thing about Top is he still calls himself an interview whore. He's like, I've been interviewed 73 times, right? And he's like, it's gotten so bad now that I do an AAR right after an interview, regardless if I got looked at or not. He's like, okay, so let's talk about what I did good and what I didn't do good and why you're not going to choose me. But so let's pull back out of that for a second. So the success for me moving into corporate at a transition, right? So that was not without a fight. That was a huge fight, because here's the issue about the military, right? When you're getting ready to retire, typically you're going to go talk to senior leadership, right?
Yep. Yep.
Here's a fun fact. They haven't retired either. They don't know what the hell they're talking about, right? It's like listening to that specialist say, oh, I'm going to get out after this last enlistment. My uncle, he owns a garage, so I can go work for him. I can make so much money, blah, blah, blah. No, that's not how any of it works. It's the same level of, talking to a sergeant major about, hey, I want to get into this program. I've never heard of it. Not going to happen. Not going to lie. I was overseas, right? I was in the Middle East retiring. I was trying to get into this organization, this program. I had to contact the regional sergeant major who was fighting me, saying, I've never heard of this before. So I'm not going to allow you to join it.
Right.
And I'm like, you understand I'm retiring, right? I'm not trying to I'm not vying for your job. Trust me, I don't want anything in this uniform job. I want to be out. And so I had to fight with leadership because they had not heard about these things. And so if you reach out to different leadership, they're all like, oh yeah, well, all you need to do is this, this, and this. How do you know? Okay. It's like the blind leading the blind. So that was a huge hurdle that a lot of people don't think about. They're like, I'm going to go talk to my leadership. Okay. You know what happens when you get out of the military? You talk to about a fraction of a percent of the people you used to work with, right? They're not going to follow up. Hey man, how you doing? Now, if you have 20 years with somebody, those people will reach out because you never stop talking, right? But most leadership, and I know you experience it too, once your retirement packet drops and you start getting to the point where you have to go to ACAP and all those other things, guess what starts happening? You start being a thorn in the side of your leadership because you're holding up a spot, right? You're filling a gap that needs to be filled, but not by you in the MTO. And so you're of no use to them. So they start and everyone around you starts to kind of give you the shoulder, right? Yep. So the transition out, the difficult thing about that, like I said, is that when you turn to leadership, because that's what you've been told to your whole life in the military, is go to your leadership and ask them for assistance or direction and so on and so forth. Well, the thing is that nobody can give you direction because all those people have already gone. They're gone.
Right.
Right. And so it's a guessing game. So how do you get to the point where you have a successful, transitional period? Finding an organization. If I could scream this so the people in the back could hear it, do not try to get out and wing it or be like, I'm going to, I have MRT, so I'm great with human relations, HR. Right. That's like an HR, wet dream right there, right? You don't know anything about HR on the civilian side, right? You don't know anything about unions. You don't know anything about their stuff. Bruh, you're so far out. And then a lot of people getting out, oh, I'm going to go work and I'm applying for these management jobs. You want to get out and then day one show up with no experience in that job, the civilian side, and you want to take over a company? I'm like, that. You don't understand how asinine that sounds listening to it now.
Yeah, I remember someone talking to us about that, and they said, so can a senior level manager, director, whatever, put on the Army uniform and come run a company or a battalion? And my only contradiction to that is, no, you can't, because there are rules, regulations, and culture that you have to learn to become a soldier. Leadership itself is equal across the board. And if you look at the history of the last, 3-5 years with toxic leadership in the civilian workforce, maybe we don't need to look so hard at resumes, and we need to find another way to identify quality characteristics of a human being. Someone's not going to be a dirtbag leader running a company. But I mean,
absolutely correct.
It plays.
Yeah, no, that's so. The thing about resumes is it's before an actual person even looks at it, it's going to go through multiple systems where it's looking for keywords, right? These are scanning systems. These aren't people. These are scanning systems that you have to get vetted first before it even gets to somebody who's a human who looks at it, and then a human error. It's their own personal bias towards things. Like the last job I had, I was the first person they've ever hired from outside the company.
Right.
And I would tell you, this company is over 100 years old. So there's that, right? But it was because it was, and honestly, and I have no problem saying this, one of the hiring managers at a sister agency, they knew me because he was a sergeant major and he sat through one of my MRT classes.
Okay.
And when my name popped up, he was like, dude, I know that guy. He's like, then he started talking all this fluff. And so he contacted the hiring manager at the place I worked at. And that's really how I got to the front of the line. Now, I still had to interview and woo all the hiring managers myself. But that might have, some people are like, oh, it must be nice. Yeah, it must be nice.
Well,
it was fantastic.
Not only is it nice, it's necessary. Guys, like if you struggled or you're struggling to find a job, the saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know, applies to the civilian workforce more than anything else. And I'm not talking about get on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is Facebook for corporate America. They just blow each other and talk about how awesome they are. It's the stupidest thing. I
Right.
hate it. I tried. I found leaders. You find someone 2 or 3 degrees separated, you're like, "Oh, you do this. This sounds cool." I was told to kick rocks. I was treated with more disrespect by fellow veterans on LinkedIn than anything else. And I've never had a successful job lead on LinkedIn. So I don't know what that thing does.
So I will tell you though that your whole thing about the invisible veteran thing is there's two notions that I wanted to call bullshit on for people who are still in and are getting ready to retire. Number one is I was under the notion that organizations had to hire veterans, right?
Right.
So I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to get my bachelor's degree and I'm going to get, the Lean Six Sigma, the green belt and all that stuff like that. I'm trying to pad my resume because I'm not competing against civilian Joe. I'm competing against you, right? Because if they're going to look at both of our resumes, well hell, I got to be better than him. That's not the case at all. I'm competing against company assets, right? These golden children who started at a young age, started working there, and then the company sent them to school to get certified in their positions, and then so on and so forth. These people who are a lot younger than you are, and because the company had invested in them and they're trying to go for that position that's open, that's who I'm competing against. It has nothing to do with being a veteran. Veteran doesn't mean a goddamn thing. I don't care what anybody tells you. So you're competing against those folks, right? And then the second thing I learned the hard way, right? So I was in the quality field. The reason I decided to go for the quality field is because quality is a lot like being an NCO, right? It's enforcement of standards, right? So what better way to transition to something than, follow something that's close to it instead of going out there and be like, I'm going to try something completely new and cross my fingers. But when I went into that field, the invisible veteran thing is very, very true, but there's something else that I think is missing, and that is that there is a stigma that sticks to every veteran who joins the civilian workforce, especially a corporation that has no military affiliation. And that is that when you show up, they look at you not like an asset to the organization, other than the fact of, oh, they've got leadership skills. That's as far as it goes, right? They don't look at you like, oh, he's a problem solver. No, they're like, see here, he's an enforcement of standards. That's what they do, right? Or they have leadership qualities. So that seems good. I can't tell you how many times, but I can tell you the first time that I sat in a meeting and I listened to people talk, and it was some of the dumbest shit I've ever heard. And I was like, man, they talked about the problem for 2 seconds, and then they were like circling it for an hour, right? I'm like, we've already identified what we're going to do. Why do we need to be here for an hour talking about what we're going to do 10 times over? And so I had presented a very clear and concise explanation of what our actions need to be. And brother, I will tell you, they all looked at me like I had a dick run on my forehead. And I was like, kind of looking around, and they were almost aghast by the fact that I was educated. And that right there, sir, is the number one punch to the face, is when you realize how you're actually seen. When you go into a workforce that's non-military, non-government related, and you start speaking a way that is English to them, but they didn't know you could speak that English, you kind of get categorized. And on top of that, when you try to do things like, would you please utilize this system this way in accordance with work instructions and SOP, you're being viewed as being aggressive because you're telling somebody what to do instead of asking them what to do.
Right.
Right. And so, but that big thing there is that you get viewed a certain way no matter where you work. And if you work in a place that has military affiliation, all it is at that point is who is the bigger dick, right? Who had the most rank, or who had the most deployments, or none of that stuff matters. None of it matters. And so the two notions when you get out of the military is, one, you're competing against veterans. You're not. You're competing against everybody. And then when you decide that you're going to get into a place, and you do, don't dumb yourself down. Don't dull yourself out. Don't do any of that stuff to try to fit in. Stay the way you are and stay sharp. And what happens is you're not going to make a lot of friends because you're going to start threatening a lot of people, and not in a violence way, but in a way that you are quite efficient at what you do. And so then people start looking for ways to call you out and anything you do wrong, right? Because they don't want to be threatened by your leadership abilities or your problem solving abilities. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents on the whole thing getting out. There's that.
I love that. When you said don't dumb yourself down, it reminds me of a poem by Marianne Williamson, and it's actually the prologue in the book. And it says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond frightens us. And, you're not supposed to stop being you so other people aren't uncomfortable. Right. So you hit the tip of the iceberg on feeling the sting from corporate America. How did that shape your decision to run the farm full time?
Okay. Well, one of the issues that I see is that, and it's just like being in the military, right? So you have an NCBR due, right? And what's the most common thing they tell you to do? Go ahead and fill out those bullets and give me some stuff that you did, instead of being the kind of leader that says, hey, I got your NCBR ready. Take a look at it, right? It doesn't change the civilian world either. They do the same thing. Go ahead and fill out, what your accomplishments are. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's your job, right? Because anything that my guys have done, I've got a whole roster of big achievements they have, and I track all that stuff. So when it comes time for me to do a performance review, I can just look at that and pull from that.
Yeah, but you're a rare breed.
Well, it just seems okay, and I'm not trying to say I'm better than anybody. I'm just saying that, like, that just seems like common sense to me, right?
Right.
One of the bigger things that happen, okay, so like I said, my background is quality, right? And I'm not talking about I just sit there with a stamp and I just stamp the product as it goes out.
Right.
And I have to look at everything from, so I'm not going to keep it a secret. I work for a distillery, right? I'm not going to say what distillery, but I work for a distillery. And so my job was to look at finished product, okay? And everything from the quality of the liquid to the labeling structure to the glass structure to the final product going out, and even the boxes, making sure that everything was in accordance with state, government, federal, you name it, kind of thing across the board. And so the other thing was also do investigations into root cause analysis to figure out, okay, something went wrong, right? There's a defect on this product. Where did it come from? All right. Now we gotta backtrack and figure out where it came from. Then we had to figure out a solution to prevent it, to reduce it, or to stop it. Right. So there was a couple of defects that had eluded folks apparently for like 2-3 years prior to me getting there. And once I picked up on it and it had brought to my attention, I was like, okay. Took me 2 weeks and I figured it out. Right. And then I had come up with a solution, basically just adjust the work instruction and no cost to the organization and reduce that defect by like 98%. Right. Okay, cool. So then I end up working with people from another country that were owners of the organization, the umbrella, if you will, and looking at certain defects on a certain product. And in doing so, figured out how to reduce defects by reduce waste, not saying reduce personnel, so not cutting jobs, but be able to pull those certain personnel off that to put onto another area. So you're not cutting jobs, you're just reducing the manpower on that. So I do that stuff, and you're talking cost savings up to like $500,000 at almost no cost, right? And you knock these things out. Okay, good. All right, awesome. So what ends up happening is that I realized that no matter how hard you work or how hard you try not to work, everyone's performance reviews are almost the same. I was like, well, that's interesting. Now, and I take full responsibility. There was 2 days out of that year, the last year I worked there, that I had left early. I had some personal stuff going on. I had to leave, and I didn't have time to explain to my manager, my supervisor, why I was leaving or that I had left. I just contacted the local leadership, let them know, and I bounced. Anyways, my performance review I got the last year I worked there, I had saved the company almost projected savings of like almost $700,000, right?
Hmm.
And again, cost of the company was minimal, almost to the point I've been talking about. And but because I left those 2 days, my performance review grade does not fully meet expectations. And that's not what bothered me. What bothered me was had I not left those 2 days, I would have been met expectations.
Right.
So you're telling me that everyone on my team should have been able to save the company that much amount of money? And then that's the expectation? Because that's the case, then everybody else should have been 100% does not meet expectations.
Talk about not being able to see the forest through the trees.
Yeah. So it was that situation right there where I was like, man, I'm missing time with my kids, who they spent their whole lives in the military with me, missing me. I'm missing games, I'm missing events, stuff like that, and everything. And I think that was the needle was already on the tip, right? And that's what pushed the needle over for me is when I realized no matter how hard I work, no matter how much time I give to this organization, I will never be exceeds on any level because they generalize your performance across the board. As long as you don't get in trouble, everyone gets met expectations except for maybe one person, right? So, and then everyone's raises are exactly the same. How? So if you're working your ass off because you want to get a raise, and no matter how hard you work, everyone gets the same raise. Basically, all you're just showing me is that the amount of time and effort I'm putting into this is not valuable to you, right? I could do nothing. In fact, I even tested it out. For the last, I'd say, probably 5 months I worked there, I didn't approach any projects. I didn't approach any defects. I didn't do any investigations. And you know what the status quo was? Zero change. There was no, hey, are you doing okay? There was none of that stuff whatsoever. It was absolutely just null. Didn't matter. And so the thought process I had is like, look, I know I have a skill set. I proved it out here on my farm. I have done other things, and I had the ability to and the potential to. If I was able to work full time for myself, the sky's the limit of what I can do.
Hmm.
So I might as well invest my time into what I do because the results will be immediate, right?
Absolutely.
Because here's the one I heard this statement when I first retired, and I didn't hold much weight until afterward. But I'm looking back on it, it screams loud, and that is that civilians don't like to solve problems; they like to admire them. And that came from a veteran who retired about 6 months prior to me retiring, and he had made that statement. And like I said, it didn't hit, at the time. But like I said, looking back on it, civilians don't like to solve problems; they like to admire them. And there couldn't be a truer statement. But I'm not complaining. I mean, I had a great job, right? I made a decision to leave. The people I worked with, they, inherently great people. Okay, I don't have anything negative to say about them or all that stuff like that. But leadership, I mean, bro, you don't retire at the bottom of the totem pole.
Right.
And so when you go into another job, another organization completely separate from yours, you can't help but see things from that leadership position, that viewpoint. And there's a lot of things I saw that I just did not like. And I was like, you know what? I think I am just done working for people and asking permission and hoping things turn out right and hoping that my percentage is enough to matter, kind of thing.
Yep.
And then hoping my kids don't continue to hate me for always being gone. So, right? My daughter, she would ask me one time, she's like, Dad, do you like being gone? I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, you're never home. You're either, when you were in military, you were gone all the time. And now that you have work, you retired. She's like, I see you probably just as much, if not less now that you're working. And so, yeah, people need to make money. I get that, but my advice to people when you get out of the military, don't settle for the first thing that lands in your lap.
Yeah.
Find something that makes you happy. right? Get your VA squared away. Your retirement's going to happen. Get your VA squared away. You hammer the VA until you get what you deserve.
Yep.
And then when that happens, obviously, if you want to get some BS job during that time frame, then get that going. But if you're not happy, brothers and sisters, I will tell you right now, people do this all the time. They quit.
Yep.
I know it's so foreign. My first job I had, I hated my job. I absolutely hated my job. I loved the money, but I hated my job. Now I was on part of I was part of a mass let go, if you will, right? And I was the only guy in the HR meeting who was laughing and giggling the whole time. I'd never been so happy in my life because I didn't know how to quit. The HR rep, he's saying, I was asking questions. I was like, man, you have an awesome job. He's like, oh, I don't know if it's awesome. I was like, look, you get to wreck people's days and your sleep doesn't change. And he was like, no, I don't see it that way. It's just a job. And I was like, yeah, just like mine was just a job. And I asked him, I was like, so am I able to reapply here? Not that I ever would, but he's like, "Dude, is there any reason I could not apply here?" He's like, no, you're not being let go. You're just being laid off. And he's like, yeah, you're more than welcome. I was like, are there any openings in HR? He was so happy to have me walked out. Man, I was skipping. And my director was walking me out, because once you get let go, then you get treated like a potential criminal, right? And so I'm getting walked out. And I was like, man, great timing on that. I just started the extension on my house. Not that I was ever going to be bothered by that, but I was just so excited because, my wife was asking me to quit that job, right? And so, yeah, it is what it is. But because I was part of an organization, I got a job again. So that's the big wing there. Yeah.
All right. Talking about community and purpose, you are involved with some pretty big organizations and people, some big projects and veteran initiatives. What drives you to serve your community in this new way?
Great question. Great question. So I just recently joined the Combat Vets Motorcycle Association, the CVMA. And the reason I joined them is because I went to a big fundraiser bike rally. And that was the first time I had been around like veterans, like a large group of veterans. And man, I'm not gonna lie, as soon as our bikes all got out and we're doing the big rollout and everything, I was tearing up because it was the first time I felt like I was home. So, because when you go to the civilian world, man, it's not, when you're in a platoon and you got your squad, you got your team, whatever. I mean, you're at each other's houses, you're drinking, you're barbecuing, you're out just doing whatever kind of thing. The civilian side, that shit does not exist. I don't care who you are unless you're blue collar work. But in corporate life, that does not exist because as soon as you clock out, nobody wants to talk to anybody, right? And so you feel real, real alone in the corporate world. And then obviously you left all your friends, your family basically in the military in uniform. And so you don't belong there, right? They're gone. Okay. You're a thank you for your service guy now. And in the corporate world, the only time you have friends is between the hours of whatever your shift starts and ends.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the end of it. So I joined the CVMA because it was the first time I felt like I was around my people again, my tribe. So as far as do their stuff, I sit on a board in Louisville. It's called the Bishop Table, and it's full of all kind of city leaders from everything from activists to judges to hospital directors to inspector generals, assistant police chiefs, all that good stuff. And they support the west end of Louisville, which is the downtrodden side of Louisville, the underrepresented type of thing. And my partner and I are the agricultural connection to that, right? Now, that doesn't sound like anything veteran. I get that. Well, there is a part of that is that I'm also a veteran rep up there for the homeless encampments, trying to put things together to go out. And instead of being like, we should help veterans, you should do a lot of things, but while you should be doing that, I'll be out there. Okay. And so we get on the ground and are able to make contact through networking and stuff because there's people, the city has their own organization that are liaison for the homeless encampments. And if you're trying to go in there and do things that really, no matter what you say to them, it sounds like you're trying to take their job.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to pretty much stop asking for permission and just start doing. Now, why do I want to help homeless veterans? Simple. There were times in my life that if I didn't have my brothers and sisters by my side, it would have been lights out, right? or it would have been just one of those things where you just constantly are just hitting a wall, and frustration on those levels just don't add up to anything good. So why do I help them? Simple. A lot of these folks don't have access to VA because they don't know anything about VA because no one's told them about VA. They haven't hooked them up with individuals to go through and get them scanned and get them processed through the VA, because a lot of these folks are sitting on money they don't even know anything about. And that money could be the one thing that gets them off the street and into a job, or at least into a home. The one reason I really started doing the homeless veteran thing is because I met a guy up there one day, and he was a homeless cat, and we were talking, because that's one thing my wife and I do is we put together go bags every winter. And then once we get our go bag set, we'll be out. We always have a couple with us, and if we run across somebody, we'll sit down with them, and I like to hear their stories, right? I like to, just learn about them, and sometimes just having a conversation with somebody is everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was talking to this cat, and he's like, yeah, I was a Marine and blah, blah, blah. And, talking about his service and stuff. And I was like, oh, that's super cool. And I was like, dude, how'd you get out here? Kind of thing. And he's like, and this is going to bust your balls, man. He's like, my wife has dementia, and the money that I have from, a few things here and there, he's like, she's in a home, and I can't afford to live in a house and her live in that home. And so I live on the streets. Ooh,
Wow.
so that she can have a place to stay. That's selflessness. You grab that, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so I immediately contacted some folks, and have been consistently trying to get this guy found. It's the one guy. He's my Moby Dick right now. He's the one guy I cannot find, and I have been searching for this guy. Anyways, things like that. So we also did, separate from that, veteran transition, through USA Cares and stuff like that. So USA Cares, like I said before, their small pieces transition. Their large piece of transition is making sure they keep a roof over your head and the lights on. My dad had asked me a while back, all these organizations out here, they talk about preventing suicide. So you give them a bunch of money. He's like, what are they actually doing? I couldn't answer the question. Right. I was like, I don't know. I've been to different events, from a lot of these nonprofit organizations that seem to profit a lot off veteran assistance, right? But USA Cares, their drive is, how do we prevent suicide? Well, let's look at a deeper root real quick, So anxiety, right? Anxiety is the root of all evil. Okay. And so a lot of people, they decide to check out because they cannot control their circumstances. So where does anxiety come from? The root of anxiety is lack of control. And so if you are having money problems, you have anxiety. If you have relationship problems, you get anxiety, and the anxiety breeds from there, and then becomes depression, it becomes anger, it becomes all these different types of things. So if we can combat at least the control side of the house, then absolutely we can make a difference. And so that's what USA Cares does, is once you reach out to them, they go through the process, and I mean, literally putting groceries in your fridge, keeping your lights on, getting you a place to stay. Veterans struggling, let's get them to a position where they can, stop, rest, and reset. Right. So I do a lot of speaking for them. Whenever they have veterans who are in the retirement services, transitional services, and are kind of starting to freak out, they contact me, and I go link up with them, sit down, talk, and kind of bring them back down to earth and give them a breath of fresh air. Do that stuff there. And then, we just do a lot of little events here and there and stuff like that. But why? The question is why. That was your question, is why.
I love it.
Well, that's kind of an easy one, man. People are like, oh, we fought for your freedom. I didn't fight for anybody's goddamn freedom, right? I didn't fight for the president, the POTUS, and everything else like that. I got sent out there to do that stuff. I was fighting for the person on my left and right. That's the only people I give a shit about, right? Is that every time we put on our gear and we go out on patrol, whether it be a combat patrol or it be going out and doing LE patrols, right? Responding to domestics or, everything across the board you could think of. I'm not out there making sure that person's okay. I'm out there showing up because I want to make sure the person on my left and right is okay. So when you get out of the military and you have made it a career, that doesn't just turn off like a switch, right? You don't feel so connected to veterans until you become one.
That man, amen. Yeah.
That's the craziest thing is that, you see these cats out here who, they got their Vietnam hats on or, Korean War hats or, you don't see a lot of World War II hats no more. But,
Unfortunately.
but you meet these guys when you're in, you're like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. Thank you for your service. But you don't really internalize what it's like to be now almost, I don't even have a good word for this without like just being almost aggressive in it. You're a has-been. You're used
Correct.
to be,
Yep.
right? And when you get out, the craziest thing about it, you don't belong anywhere. And I'm not trying to make someone listen to this and be like, fuck it, I'm out. But you don't belong anywhere, right? You belong behind glass on a shelf, and you're a break glass if needed, like a Steven Seagal movie when they bring all the Navy dudes back to get the ship going again, right? All the World War II cats to get a ship going.
Right.
But you don't really belong. You don't belong to the civilian side. You don't belong to the active duty side anymore. You're like this purgatory of a soldier, right? And when you see other veterans, or especially veterans of your genre, right, your generation, and you start talking, I very rarely have ever talked to somebody other than some annoying bastards, but I very rarely ever talked to a veteran that's from, the same dirt that I stepped on and all that good stuff that doesn't just give me like it's almost like a burst of just sunshine, right? Because we're sitting there talking about, oh yeah, this and this and everything, and then like that, and then because no matter how tough it was in the military, those are some of the greatest days of your life, right? Those are transitional periods in your life, things that happened that shaped who you are today, good, bad, or indifferent. Those were shaping mechanisms, right? And so when you're able to reflect back on your youth, because that's what it is, when you retire, that's all you have, homie, is your youth, right? But when you get out and you become a veteran, that's when you truly see veterans apart from everybody. And so I don't ever want someone to feel the way I used to feel. And I don't want people struggling who are veterans to struggle and think that there's no one out there, right? For some reason, and I don't know why this hits so hard for me, right? Is the phrase, welcome home, brother.
Yep.
How does that not land? The reason that lands so hard is because we always feel like we're floating in like the third realm of everybody else, right? And so that's why that, for some reason, that statement just alone, just for me to say that to somebody, to get them off the street or to get them in a situation where they're good and they're happy and they're relieved and their anxieties drop and they can be a caretaker to their family, the leader that they were bred to be. That right there is huge to me.
Well, you're making them feel seen, and that this season is called The Invisible Veteran. The book is called The Invisible Veteran, and I think you painted such a very poignant and relevant and timely picture of what it feels like to be invisible. And if you're listening and you think this is a big dig at being a civilian or your good times are behind you, it's not. It's reclaiming your purpose, your identity, and learning how to connect. And I mean, you're such a wordsmith and just such an incredible person. Neither one of us expected to be this old, right?
Bro.
Never thought I'd see 40, let alone almost 45. Legacy probably wasn't even in our vocabulary, but now that you've had some time out of the uniform, you've had a couple careers, you're on a new glide path. How would you define what your legacy is now, or what you want it to look
That is a fantastic question, man. Because when you get out of the military, or even before you got out of the military, up to that point, I think I always call them they look like caskets to me, but shadow boards, right? When you get out and you get a shadow board that has typically it's your uniform top and it has all your shadow box. I'm sorry. You have your uniform in there and it has all your medals and stuff there on there, and it's encased behind glass, right? And you look at that and you're like, man, that's my legacy right there, right? And once you get out and you start looking at that uniform behind glass starts to give a different taste to it, right? That looks no different than walking into a military museum and seeing those uniforms behind glass. And the key word there being museum. Okay. So how do I look at my legacy now, or how I want my legacy to be? Man, getting out of the military is like graduating high school all over again. When you get out of high school, man, the sky is the limit. You're excited. You're for like the first month. I'm not going to lie. I was cocky as shit. You couldn't tell me anything to ruin my day. They're like, oh, well, you can't do that. I'm retired. You can't tell me to do shit. They're like, oh, you can't park there. The hell I can't. Call the cops. I'll have my stuff bought and gone before they get here anyways. I'm retired. But looking about it took me a minute. It took me a hot minute, man. I can't even say I'm even there yet, tell you the truth, but I'm a lot
Right.
closer than I was
Facts.
about who do I want to be when I grow up? Because that's really what it feels like when you get out of the military. Who I want to be when I grow up? Because you get to be you now. Well, shit, the only you I know is in uniform, right? You're talking, okay, two things that have always kind of hammered me, and that was statements from people, right? And then the realization of it. So I've been told way more than not, okay, you play too much, right? And you hear a lot of people talk about young soldiers as being immature, or even soldiers who are older who are big kids, right?
Yep. Yep.
Now let's just look at this for a second. Let me help you make sense of this. Okay, why are we big ass kids? Okay, and this is aside from dark humor. Push dark humor to the side because we know dark humor is a coping mechanism. That's all that is. Okay, we make wild jokes out of wildly inappropriate times because that's how we operate. But that's not my point here. My point here is why do we act like big kids? Well, and then you look at people who are our same age and they act old as fuck, right? Who are not military. So why? Well, the why is because you know how when you deploy and you left your house the way it is and you left your life and then you go deploy for a year and then you come back and you feel like the bus stopped at that station and you want to go back to that station. But the truth be told, when you come back, that bus had left that station long ago and you're coming back to a whole new station. Life had gone on without you and you have to try to assimilate back into the life you had in your head, right? That's part of it. Okay. But their part is too, is that when you go in the military, who are your mentors? People who joined when they were 17, 18 years old, right? Who are
Right.
their mentors? People who are 17 to 18 years old. We are kids leading kids, and then we grow up to be adult kids, right? Because we never had like the old heads to get us to go the next level kind of thing. So how do you find yourself through that? Your whole uniform, your whole career is that's your identity, right? You walk through a store, you walk somewhere and someone sees your uniform. Oh man, hey, thank you for your service. And I really appreciate what you do. Right. And you're like, okay. Then you take your uniform off and you're left with this stupid hat. And then you got to walk around and everything. But so your legacy when you get out, you're looking at your legacy. So the reason I haven't really found my legacy now is because I'm still building it. Right. The legacy from my first part of my career is on the chest of my jacket. That's the legacy I left, the imprint I left on my soldiers and the people I served with. Yeah, you're going to be talked about by a couple people for maybe the rest of their lives, maybe the rest of the day, right? But your legacy for that chapter of your life, that's where it culminated right there, is behind that shadow box. Now, when you leave the military and you become a veteran, you're building a whole new legacy now. You get to be the person you want to be. I'm still discovering how to be retired. I'm also discovering how to balance between working myself into the dirt and enjoying myself. Right? When you graduate high school, again, the sky's the limit. Right? You've had someone there to tell you what to do and how to do it and when to do it, Monday through Friday. Okay, every day. And then we get out of high school, they're like, all right, well, good luck. And you're like, sweet, I'm free. And then you're like, well, that sucks. So to answer your question the best I can about what my legacy is now, I don't know. But I know that what the lasting legacy I want to leave that matters the most to me is that my kids and my current grandchild and my future grandchildren can look back and say, man, that guy loved the hell out of us.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome. This conversation has been such a powerful reminder that being invisible isn't about going unnoticed. It's about whether or not we let ourselves be seen, whether we have the courage to step into our community and make a difference, and if we're willing to be vulnerable and share our struggles and our wins. Thank you so much for being on here, brother. I love you.
I love you too, man. As gay as that sounds, but yeah, no, this has been a complete honor. I've told you before, and I'll blow your head up a million times, but I absolutely love what you're doing. I love the fact that you're putting this in a way that people can learn from it, because that's the thing, man, is that getting out. I never even once thought about listening to anybody talk about being out. Right? It was getting out. Getting out is all I ever wanted to hear about. Right? Being out, and there ain't shit out there, not a lot of it at least, that resonates the way that the stuff you're doing does.
Thank you. Thank you, Kay, for sharing your story and experiences with us. You're a very busy man, and I appreciate you taking time out of your hectic schedule to help me pursue this endeavor. Thank you for listening to the Enduring Mindset podcast. If this episode spec to you, share it with a friend, a family member, or a colleague who might need it. And make sure to follow us on Instagram at enduring_mindset_enterprise, where we'd love to hear from you, especially if anything resonated with you. Until next time, onward, forward, fall out.